Bueno, muy buenos días a todos y muchas gracias por conectarse nuevamente a esta sesión del programa de One Trip. En esta ocasión tenemos el gusto de contar con la presencia de Gunther Hartwig, que estará a cargo de esta sesión donde hablaremos de Product Growth y Continuous Discovery Habits. Para que todos sepan, si no han hecho ya la investigación, Gunther tiene más de 25 años de experiencia en Product and User Experience Design, en empresas destacadas como YouTube, Zynga, Drone Deploy, por nombrar algunos. Ya les daré un poquito más de contexto a la experiencia. Y sobre todo es un amigo de la casa que está muy comprometido con el avance de los founders. Ya lleva por lo menos 3 años participando en el programa, pero mucho más tiempo estando activo en la comunidad. Es de esas personas que realmente le ha sumado no granos, sino buenos lotes de arena a esta playa que estamos intentando construir. Entonces, de nuevo, estamos muy agradecidos, Gunther, por nuevamente contar contigo. Muchos de ustedes ya tuvieron un peek preview de lo que vamos a ver, porque les compartió la presentación. Entonces, eso es por un lado. Para poder ya darle la palabra a Gunther, sí es importante que él entienda dónde está cada uno de ustedes y desde sus propias palabras que sepan qué es lo que están haciendo. Entonces le voy a pedir de nuevo, brevemente, cada uno de ustedes en un minuto, que cuente qué está haciendo su startup y que así podamos darle un primer pantallazo a Gunther y sobre eso poder avanzar. Entonces, dicho eso, se darle la palabra a Carlos Agudelo, Charlie de Guava.
Preguntar, mucho gusto.
Sí, mucho gusto.
¿You
Hola,
prefer
¿cómo está?
English
Oh,
or...
sí, mucho gusto todos. Esta es la tercera vez con habla con los startups de, Buen Trip y el programa. Y es, muy emocionado para la sesión hoy. Pero es obvio, mi español no es mucho bueno, aprendiendo, pero necesito mucho practicar, sí. Y, quiero que esta sesión sea útil para todos. Y el mayoría está en inglés, sí, pero quiero que, tú estás cómodo, sí. Tienes preguntas o otros. Leo está aquí, sí, para asistencia con translación, sí. Y también es una versión de las presentaciones en inglés y español, sí. Y yo compartido con todos, sí. Una ambición de mí en mi tiempo en Ecuador es es mejorar mi español y, para las conversaciones profesionales y otros. Pero para todos es un poco difícil para mí. Gracias y thank you. I will switch back to English now. I hope you understand that I made sense. See, and I am very honored and pleased to be able to speak with you all today, and hopefully, we'll provide some usefulness to you. Like I said, if there's questions, it's easier in Spanish. Please speak. Yo entiendo mucho mejor de hablando, habla. So let's kick it off then, and I will just start sharing. But Leo, I need you to let me share my screen.
Okay. Sure.
Primero, I'm hoping we can just sort of go around the room and everybody just say hello and maybe a quick introduction.
Yep, that's what we're gonna. So Charlie, we can kick off with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, see.
We feel pretty much empathy for people speaking in Spanish, so no worries about that. But this kind of content is so much better if you can in English. So I'm the CEO and founder of Guava. At Guava, we essentially are creating a checkout experience, a frictionless online shopping experience through the checkout, preventing fraud and boosting the payment rate success through orchestration of payment methods to increase the lifetime value for e-commerce merchants. It's essentially a no-code integration that in minutes enables e-commerce and business to have one-click shopping experience, upsells and subscriptions, and remote checkout. That's what we are trying to do. And with me, Luciano, which is our CTO.
Hola. Okay. Hey, yeah.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And yes, adding a little context on why we started in Spanish, Gunther just wanted to make sure that all of you are free to speak in Spanish. If that's easier for you, he can perfectly understand it. So we just wanted to put that there. But obviously, the language by default in this session will be English. So, okay. Now moving forward, Jesus from BoxUp.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you, Gunther. My name is Jesus Alderete. I'm the co-founder and CTO at BoxUp. BoxUp is a fintech SaaS B2B that offers digital features and data analytics for banks mainly in Latin America. Thank you.
Yeah.
And here is Lorena. Maybe he can present her.
Okay, Lorena.
Hi, Gunther. Nice meeting you. I am also a co-founder of BoxUp and CFO. We are a platform that helps banks and financial institutions to understand their clients' customers' transactional behavior through data analytics and BI. And we also provide digital functionalities that can integrate with platforms of these financial institutions to provide PFM functionalities. I mean, personal finance management functionality. We are currently working in Paraguay and entering to our second market, which is Bolivia.
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
super. Okay, and I would like to give the word to Ronnie Horvath from Exponential.
Morning, Gunther. Great to meet you. Appreciate your time. I'm here with also my co-founder and CTO, Andres Rom. We are a company that we've developed a product that it integrates hardware, a platform on the cloud, and connectivity services in order to drastically reduce the risks of downtime on critical operations. And our focus is we're a B2B2B. So basically, we're developing a partner network through Latin America. We're based in Ecuador, and Ecuador is our core market, is our initial market, is where our pilot market. But we're building and growing throughout Latin America, establishing that reseller and a partner network in order for them to be able to differentiate themselves and also strengthen their relationship with their customers.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Ronnie. And lastly, Germán López from Publifier.
Gunther, hi. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Amazing. Nice to see you again. Really looking forward for this session.
Excellent.
Finally, we had a nice talk last week.
Yeah, that was great.
Saturday. So, as you know, Publifier, we are building a platform that helps brands and agencies to manage their influencer campaigns on a cost per click or cost per impression model.
Excellent.
So we have active users. Our users are the influencers. So really looking forward to see how we can continuously improve our products. So
excellent. All right, no, cool. Thank you all so much for those intros. And it's always fascinating to see the different things that are people up to. And I'm always really excited to hear, what people are working on, the ideas, and particularly, of course, to hear, since you're in the program here, that everybody's having some success and traction and getting somewhere with their projects. So I will now jump into, let me share my presentation here. Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Great.
Crystal clear.
Excellent. Okay. So yes, So my topic today is what's called product-led growth and continuous discovery habits. And these are both sort of processes to help you understand users and expand your user base, right? So for just really quick, we've sort of talked a little about, I'll do a little quick introduction again on myself, and then we'll run through some of these areas of these two different processes and frameworks. And then I'm hoping that for a good part of this, we can just have a discussion at the end, right? That I might be able to set the stage, there might be questions, and then we can talk a little bit more in depth about your businesses and how some of these concepts may apply, or maybe you don't. So like I said, today I'm hoping to provide a high-level overview of the two, these current process trends in product development, right? We can't cover everything, but there's lots more to explore that's been published by experts out there on these two topics. So throughout, you'll see, within the presentations and otherwhere, I've linked to all sorts of different articles. It's my belief that in doing these presentations that there should be, when people do a takeaway, there's something of substance versus just a picture and then, me talks to it, right? Sometimes it's too much if there's a lot of text, but I also it's like, hey, here's something of substance you can follow up on. So take a look, go through, read all those articles when we're done with this, and hopefully that'll add to, the information from today, right? Like I said, also want to keep this conversational, so feel free to chime in, raise a hand, ask questions. And then we'll, of course, send the second time. And we've, I've mentioned, the desires como español, sí. So going forward, yes, just a little bit about me. I am a long-time product development person, just to reiterate some of the things that Leo was saying earlier. 20 years of experience working in B2B, B2C, SaaS, et cetera, mostly based in firms in the Silicon Valley. So doing a lot of stuff there. Most recently, I was working at a company that was developed, or it continues to develop software that leverages drones for data analytics, things like that, for both for like industry, agriculture, and so on and so forth. But I've also worked on large-scale media platforms, health and wellness, and financial technologies, and a wide variety of different sort of softwares. Again, oftentimes jumping back and forth between B2B and B2C, and most everything is SaaS in a certain way at this point. So hopefully that's going to be relevant for you guys, right? And then also, in my past, I studied anthropology as an undergraduate. And for those of you who don't know, the long-term connection is Fernando Rivera from Blaine Tripp and I were college classmates. So we've actually known each other for a long time, shall we say. So going from that, let's just jump right in and talk a little bit about what this notion of product-led growth. As we're going through this and recognizing the different businesses you guys are in, some of these concepts may be more applicable to you now, some might not seemingly be applicable to you, some may be more interesting later. And I definitely want that to be part of our conversations we go through here. There's a lot of different ways in which people put forward concepts and notions of how to do product, development. None of them are exactly the right thing for every situation, right? But there are some that do have applicability across a wide variety of endeavors, right? So let's start with this one. And these are both like trends that are sort of happening right now and people talking about like a lot. And the first of which is what we call product-led growth. Now, product-led growth, as you can see here, it's a methodology in which sort of a acquisition, expansion, retention, et cetera, is really focused very specifically on how people are using the product or within the product itself, right? Versus sales channel, sort of traditional sales channels or others, right? And one of the values of this is, as stated here, is that it can help really center and align teams together, right? So that everybody's focused on sort of their efforts on the same way, as opposed to not necessarily working against each other, but not necessarily always in alignment, right? Some examples that you may well have known, there's a lot of them out there. It's actually far more common than you think. I mean, one of my favorites, of course, is like Slack, right? If you know the history of how Slack started, it was really just something that software that was released into the public, and it was adopted by teams. The company I was at when Slack first came out, I was the first one to sort of like establish, for myself,
right? A version of it, and then sort of expanded around the group, and eventually was taken on by the whole organization. So there's lots of different examples of these. I also include YouTube here. YouTube's not necessarily always in that, but it was also one of those where it was essentially like virally spread across everybody, you know, because people were easily able to share videos and all that sort of thing beforehand. But there's some other examples you can see across a wide variety of industries. Some of them, of course, also not just in software, but in products. Warby Parker is an excellent example of that. If you were familiar with Warby Parker, they're the, you know, cheap glasses company and that sort of thing. And they used a lot of these same tactics to grow their businesses as well. Okay. The thing is, and this goes back to some of it's like, who is this product-led growth thing for, right? It's not necessarily for every organization. There are a few characteristics that sort of mark those who might benefit from employing these tactics, right? And you can sort of break them down in these notions of the market, model, the channel, and then the product itself, right? So the market should definitely, you know, serve a somewhat large a large audience, right? Not necessarily super niche, right? And then also be something that can be leveraged by small teams with the notion of scalability beforehand. So, you know, a lot of the idea here is this bottom up versus top down, right? The other thing is, you know, is the notion of sort of the model of how people are actually able to get into the product. And you heard tier terms like things like freemium or trials, but the idea is definitely here that you can actually get in and start using the product right away without, you know, significant barriers to entry that might stop you from actually getting some utility from the product, right? The other one is the channels by which you actually are, you know, sort of sharing and expanding and making your product known, right? Word of mouth, content marketing, you know, search types of things versus extensive and heavy, like large scale marketing campaigns, right? Or again, the sort of the top down notion, right? And then the other thing, of course, is within the product itself. It's something that's got a somewhat broad value proposition, right? It's easy to use. This is important. It's low complexity, right? And shows a quick time from like starting up to actually being something of value for you there. Right. And you can see that. I mean, going back to like the Slack example, but boom, it's like right there, really easy to sort of set it up, talk to all your friends. Obviously, it's changed a little bit since it started, but just some way to immediately get to a point where people are feeling, you know, the usefulness of it without too much trouble. Leo, yes.
With regards to the use, would you say that self-serve is part of the quality that the product should aim to have?
Yes, for the most part, and that's one of the things that talked about here. A significant amount of self-serve aspect of it is important for this particular tactic to work. And we'll talk a little about later about some of the differences between like sort of sales-led, bottom-down types of, you know, and what you call product-led, bottom-up. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize here is they're not all mutually exclusive, and they're not all necessarily things that are pertinent all the way through a customer's, you know, or a company's lifespan, right? Sometimes these things work better at different stages. So that, you know, and again, all these are things for you to value. Are they useful for you and your particular stage of the business or the type of products that you have, right? I mean, I'll give some other examples on some of this sort of thing. Salesforce, right? Does anybody actually as a user within an organization go and decide they want to use Salesforce? Nah, at this point, it's like basically some large buyer says, guess what, team? We all use Salesforce. That's just the way it is. So the top-down notion there, right? Whereas some of the others, there are actually quite a few like sort of customer management tools that are out there that are smaller in scale and grow from the ground up, right? But here's one of the things that's key, and some of the key pillars of this, right, is designing for the end user. You're not designing for a buyer. You're not designing for an executive. You're designing for that specific user that you're actually trying to target. So spending time listening to them and building a culture of sort of continuous discovery and understanding where your customers are is very important, right? The other, as I'm saying before, deliver value before capturing value. And this is one of the key distinctions to say, it's like, before I can use something, I have to pay for it, right? I'll give you another example of a tool that I use a lot, or, you know, familiar with. Esri, which is the global information or geographic information systems platform that essentially rules them all. In order to actually get more like anywhere with it, you got to pay them, right? To start out with, you can't actually go in there and do much that's useful with like a free or trial account unless you're clearly targeted towards a large purchase, right? And then the other thing that's really, really important with all these things of course, is build thinking about how you're going to be going to market. And a lot of that has to do with like particularly investing in data. I'm going to come back to this a number of times throughout all my talk with everybody here. Research in a couple of ways. One, talking to customers all the time, and two, making the investment in quality metrics and measurements, right? And those are things that often get forgotten. And so that's one of the major themes I'm going to be going throughout this, right? Throughout this process, because I've observed it a lot in startups as they're going along, and so we'll touch on this later with regard to habits. Right? How do you build these habits and not think of them as nice to haves or extras, that they're actually core and critically important to long-term success of your business? All right. I'm going to pause just for a quick second, give myself a quick drink of water here. And then on we go. Okay. The other thing to remember about a lot of these processes, and we've got a mix of different types of disciplines and functions here, but as how these are, we call it product led, but that does not necessarily mean by that product management is in charge, right? It just means where we're centering sort of our thinking about things, right? So in this case here, just trying to illustrate some of that, right? Some of the key questions that you think of across your team. So like an engineering team asks, like, how can we create this product again that goes quick time to value? I sign up and boom, I'm almost instantly doing something that's useful, right? The marketing team, asks, how can we potentially use the product itself as a lead magnet? Oh, via how we show it to people, how we let people get in, right? How we tell them about the features and all that sort of thing, but necessarily probably within the product itself, right? And then the other part of this, of course, like with a sales team, when you want to have like qualified leads that might be leading somewhere, how would we leverage the data that exists within inside the product itself to understand who might be the people who would be potential, upgrade path, all that sort of stuff, right? And then the success team, of course, is also critically important. Sometimes success teams don't really get pulled into like the series of collaboration. I think that success teams, right, customer support, all that sort of thing, are invaluable parts of the process, right, and invaluable sources of information because they're dealing with this stuff all the time, right? The problems, hearing from customers. So one should always, right, be taking them into account with things. And as noted in the previous slide, there's sometimes some of the people who you want to bring in first, even before sales, because when we bring in the success team, it gives people a sense that you're actually, you as the organization are invested in their success, right? And that oftentimes leads to significantly greater loyalty, upsell, and so on, right? So here we go, just a little chart on this. To be honest with you, I'm not sure with everybody's familiarity on a lot of these things or where you're orienting yourself, but so this will be something for us to talk about at some point, but these notions of like sales-led versus product-led. And I do know this, that when you're working for, at a B2B business, oftentimes you're thinking of in sales, right? The contracts eventually that you want to get to are probably going to be large, right? You might have a limited number of customers, right? But you've got big checks coming from them. And that's fairly typical, right? So it's a little different, and it might be one of the ways in which you're sort of focusing your business, right? But as you can see here, right, yes, this is one of those things. But the sales-led, right, you have a higher contract value annually, hopefully lower churn of them. They're not rolling over and that sort of thing. But you do have to take a lot of time, right, to maintain these relationships, to build them, to find them, and turn them into, into the actual revenue, right? The product-led side is, a lot of the big thing is like I've just got a big wide funnel at the top. Right, there's hopefully I'm getting more people who are coming in, right, and my cost of actually acquiring them is significantly less, just again due to volume, right? The other part that one to note here too is when you think about it, it's like these are also much more the people who are actually using the product. Oftentimes with sales led, it's the person on top who's trying to maybe make decisions across an entire org, and they're not necessarily always taking, specifically into account things like the user experience and what people are actually adopting and using. Right, so that's one of the advantages of people actually having some familiarity with the product, and particularly those who will be using it, right, before it's goes to scale across the organization. Right now, again, some of the cons, of course, is like it doesn't necessarily work for everything. It's better for simple sort of products versus inherently complex products, right? And you do have some of those risks of like, you've got a lot of people who are using the product, but you're not actually making any revenue from them. So it's a little bit of a balance here, right? And also depends again on the type of business you're running and where the possible target opportunities for major growth comes from. just a quick pause. Is this just to make sure this is making sense to everybody? Things resonating here? Quite a bit of this, of course, you might have seen elsewhere or maybe aren't familiar with, but just a little check-in to make sure we're tracking properly. I always like to do that because I could be going way off, somewhere, and it's like, what are you talking about, bro? But just a quick sec. We all good here? Any questions coming up so far? Okay, then we shall carry on. A critically important thing, of course, within all of these is, like, I'm going back to this, is like knowing what you're measuring and why, right? And so this is a conceptual map of a path, sort of like a journey of users. And this is one of the important things to remember. We talk about some more of this lately, but it's important to understand the path and the steps that your customers are taking from initial exposure all the way up to like what you call full adoption and retention. Some of these things aren't clear all the time, and some of them you're not necessarily at the point in your business to like try to work on all of them, but it's good to remember them and think about that, as you're trying to scale both within your organization, marketing, and then of course, obviously the product itself, that sort of thing. But in this case, one of these groups out there is a productled.org, which is a great resource for a lot of stuff like this, has this notion of what they call the flywheel, which is how you use your users to reinforce and expand, right? Because one of the biggest things with product-led growth is you use your users for sales. You use your users for acquisition, right? They're the ones who are your key evangelists, essentially, right? They talked about it. They share it with their friends. I can say that I'm one of the groups I'm working with right now is a image rendering service. It's like an internet sort of like middleware kind of thing, right? And it's focused on developers, right? And it very much is growing because like developers are often skeptical of a lot of other kinds of marketing and sales, and they talk to each other. There's a lot of forums where they use, and so there's a significant amount of referrals that just come from that. Somebody, oh, you use that tool. Okay, great, I'll use that tool as well, right? So in this case, we're talking about, it's like, the other thing that's important to notice here is like, what are the things that you're measuring? And you may have heard of some of this, but there's what's called the pirate metrics, which is R. And that's kind of, I don't know if that joke is universal or whatever, but people like to talk about how pirates go, matey, right? And so this is an example, it's a joke to come because of these key sort of metrics that you think about throughout the life cycle. Acquisition, number of people who are actually signing up. Activation, right? Have they achieved value? Are they coming back and continuing to do the thing, right? Revenue, have they turned into like starting actually giving you some money, right? Retention, right? Are they sticking around, still giving you money? And then the other one I'm talking about, like there's referral. Are they people who actually, are helping evangelize your product? And all of them go through this sort of life cycle when you look at things. They start out, they don't know anything about you, they explore and learn things, right? Which is often one reason why you have trial, premium type services, right? They're just getting going, and then they become regulars. And in that period of time, you're also hoping they become what you'd call your champions, your advocates, the people who are like, telling others about you, right? So, all these are key things. And again, one of the other ones I mentioned, going back to it, is make sure you're deciding which numbers matter to you and that you're actually tracking them. It's worth the investment early on in your product across your lifespan to invest in some sort of data services or process. It can be a lot of things. Some of them are expensive, some of them aren't, but just pull from SQL, et cetera, whatever you have at your disposal, I do it. Right, it's really hard when you have gotten yourself into some place and you don't know what's actually been going on. You think you've been evaluating one thing, but things go south, right? It's important to keep track of things continuously. All right. And then another one that I want to talk about here really quick, and then because we are, just to keep on moving, is another way of thinking about this. And this is one of the key advocates of this notion of product-led growth is a venture capital firm called OpenView. They're one of the ones people have actually formalized this a lot more. And they've been trying to look at other ways to do measurement of what success can mean for you, right? And so they've come up with this one they call the natural rate of growth, right? Which is a couple of different things that are actually very high-level business-oriented, right? But they're fairly simple. One is, what's your sort of growth in ARR over the course of the year, right? The second is what you'd call these organic signups, people who are just joined it, but they, didn't come in through sales or direct outreach kind of programs, right? And then the other one, and this is another one where metering is important, is understanding how much of that actually came from within the product itself, right? So being able to track customers from their initial point to when they made that conversion. And like I said, this is one of those that can be often hard, and I'm pushing for, all you CTOs and other people out there who deal with, instrumenting within the product, that sort of thing. Make sure you're able to measure things about your customers throughout. Make sure you're able to know what their behaviors are, when they've made transitions from one type of account to another, right? All that sort of thing, because sometimes I can get lost in the weeds, right? Oh, they were free, and I don't know when they converted to actually paying, or that's just one of them, but I'd really like to be able to see the trends across them. I'd like to be able to say, from the cohort of people who came in at a certain period of time, there was a moment in which a whole bunch of them became long-term retained customers and so on, right? A lot of these things, I know that it's extra work, it's stuff you have to do, but in the long run, laying these foundations early will help you achieve your long-term goals. So that's sort of a stopping point there for like talking about product-led growth. I haven't necessarily dived into like specific next steps or things that people should do with that, hoping that maybe it's one of those things we can talk about in discussion as people think a little bit about what's been presented there and see more how it's directly applicable to your business. So quick pause. If there are any questions at the moment, happy to take them, or we can carry on.
Maybe an interesting question for all would be, how do you identify yourself as a sales-led growth or a product, or more of a product-led growth organization, and why? Anyone?
And so we can come back to that later if people want to think on that for a little bit.
Ronnie?
Yeah.
I feel that we're more of a sales-led growth.
Yeah.
Because as we're a B2B2B, the number of partners that we're going to reach out to and eventually bring into the network, it's not a huge number.
Yeah.
It's something that it's a consultative sales type of technique where we need to perform onboarding with them, and then they can reach out to their customers. And obviously, we're working with them right now, especially in Ecuador, to be able to talk to the end user as well, to go together to the end customer. But I do feel it's a sales-based type of customer acquisition.
Super. Charlie?
In our case, it's actually a mix of efforts. We are trying to leverage our product because we have a surface that is touching the end customer, the shopper, and that's like a way to acquire and increase the amount of shoppers that are going into our product. And then we've been trying to leverage the product on the merchant side. However, something that we have like not only found on our own network, but also feedback from other similar companies, is that it's quite hard for merchants to go and like do self-service and discover the product like in their own ways. So this is kind of the challenge. However, we have the capacities to leverage the product more. And we even launched like a parallel product that helps the shoppers to track prices, for instance, is beyond the checkout experience. And we are trying to leverage that, like to have like new sources of data, have some shoppers with low friction within the product and leverage that network. However, we have some challenges, and now it's not the time to go within that, but it's too complex. But yeah, that's sort of the big picture in our side.
Yeah, all those points make sense. And like I said, in my hope here is to make people aware and exposed to some of these trends and how they're going, right? How you adopt them if you need to is, of course, going to be dependent, right? And there are some that might be a hybrid, right? There's some which it's not going to be useful at all, right? I mean, I fully understand how exponential you guys might be like, some of these things just aren't going to really work for us that well, right? However, it is nice to again, be aware of trends that are going on. And then in other cases, like we were just saying there too, it's like you might actually, you've got like almost 3 customers in that case, all of which you need to like have relating to each other in some way. And you're going to need to talk to them and pull them in potentially in slightly different ways, right? So that can get complicated for sure, right? But it's also, one of the nice things with some of these models is you don't have to do everything. It's not like it's some strict doctrine, it's like pick and choose some of these things. Again, the one I will always just continue to come back to, I've been doing this for many years. People use different terms for a lot of stuff that's been around, like this product-led growth term. It's like, oh, we were kind of doing that 15 years ago. We didn't call it anything, right? So a lot of these things just have been around. They've had their names changed somewhat. But the thing I will always reemphasize is research, talk to your customers, right? Know who they are, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, and then have good metrics and data, right? And that's a lot. People forget that. They get so caught up in an idea or executing on something, they forget some of these things, right? Or it gets thrown to the side. And that's where you can get caught later, right? Because it's most when you're just trying to decide which is the best of these ways to leverage people, you need to have that mix of sort of information in order to know, oh, the best way to talk to so-and-so is this way. Oh, this is the real pain point that, that our customers that we've identified are actually feeling, not the thing that me and my friends decided, in a room over beers the other day, whatever. So, yeah, Leo, you got a question there? Like, no, it's good, Joe.
Okay, sorry. I got a couple. Maybe we can address them here or further down the road. The first one would be, at this initial stage when you're figuring things out, would you say it's rather a dominant strategy you got to pick? I mean, if you're going to be rather sales-led or rather product-led, because if you're both, there can be a great confusion on what you're actually going to be prioritizing. So that would be, I mean, what would be your say? And the second one would be rather more distinction, because I think product-led many times sounds sexy. I am product-led growth. I have a great product people want to talk about. When that's not exactly what it is. A product-led growth is a series of strategies that are going to be based on your product, but you can also have a very sexy product that people talk about without being product-led, meaning you have growth techniques, growth hacks, virality, how to actually make people share your product, that it can be embedded in your product, but you're not actually committed to a product-led strategy, which actually many times has to do with salespeople actually thinking on other ways of doing, I mean, rather than a consulting selling business, actually thinking on how we're actually going to make our users sell for us. I completely agree on that. So I know if I'm a bit confused, but what are you saying on this one? First of all, if you think it's rather better to approach it from a dominant strategy, first of all, and then what's the differences with when we talk about growth hacks and stuff of virality with respect to just product led?
I think this is one of just looking and thinking about how your business fits within a few of these areas, and what seems, just starting out, what seems logical, right? For example, if I've got a complex product, and I really do recognize that it's not for everybody, right? That's going to be pretty obvious when you start out building everything, right? It's not, I'm not expecting 200 million users or whatever it might be, right? Even 10,000 users, maybe it's in hundreds. So clearly that's going to lend more towards sort of standard sales channels, right? And there's also a bit of marketing that goes into that as well, right? So the idea would be thinking, it's like, is this right? Could be, right? You're thinking, does it serve a very large market or is it a smaller market, right? Is it usable by small groups? Another one I'd say, here's an example. If I'm building a software that is able to control power grids, right, across an entire country, I mean, that's a viable thing you might be doing, right? If you think about people now, what's going on with that sort of stuff. I'm probably not selling that to individual. I'm thinking I'm selling this to an organization, right? It's going to be, oh, I got to go talk to power company A, power company B, and power company C, right? Or whatever it might be in order to sell this. So that's going to be inherently lead itself to feeling sales led, right? Versus something else like, say, so I'm thinking about some of these things with like regards to electrification of stuff like that. If I'm trying to sell everybody, something like home solar panels, that might be a little different, right? And that might be something that's a little bit more what you'd call product led, because people are going to be, it's individuals, they're going to be hearing about it maybe from other people next door or what have you. Does that sort of address your question there, Leo?
Yeah, I just wanted to hopefully give a clearer picture on what is and what's not, because sometimes things tend to change, and I was the first one to have a different understanding of what product-led growth, because it sounded sexy and everybody wanted to do it, whereas really not the best strategy for everyone.
Yeah,
necessarily. I mean, it's not by default. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right on. Okay. Well, let's go on to the next thing. So there's a connection here between these two things, but I also think that this notion of what we call continuous discovery habits, which is something that I love, right, and I'm a huge advocate for, is applicable no matter where you are. And the shape, it gets another one that the shape of it is going to vary depending upon what your type of organization is and how you go about it. But in essence, right, it's the notion that we need to be constantly sort of checking in with our customers and users, understanding their behaviors, and trying as much as possible to do small pieces of research, right, as opposed to having it be huge, large, and oftentimes time-consuming, resource-consuming, right? So one of the things I always like to, is always a favorite of mine. Yes, we're not our customers. We need to, design, sell, and service to their pain points, as the fellas from Pied Piper took a while to learn, right? But this is one of the other things that I say, like, going back to like what people want to be. I want to be product led. Everybody's agile. Really? Actually, agile often isn't, right? It isn't actually something that's implemented all over the place, right? It's another one of those terms. We talk about lean, we talk about agile, and oftentimes it's not the way things are. And I this is just try to illustrate. I've seen, this experiences many times where you don't have necessarily the right sort of phasing, the right sort of alignment between the team that's trying to figure out what they're doing, right? i.e. the product sort of organization, and then the engineering people are trying to build things, right? You'll have, a ramp up of, I've got something to do when everybody gets really busy. And then all of a sudden it's like, we haven't spent actually time defining what to do next. So there's a big gap, right? And I've got to build up and do all my research now. And it's like, oh my God, we just spent 6 months defining what this thing is, or whatever the time frame that matters is, right? So this notion of continuous discovery habits is a big one, right? To help try to flatten that curve out. And basically the idea being that, it's one way to sort of increase and accelerate development, effectiveness, and that sort of thing by trying to do it all in parallel and making it into chunks that are digestible and that people can actually do. And so that means, right, basically, to talk about basic definition, is regular touch points with customers, right, by the team building the product, and that's everybody. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And then small sort of research activities, but also making sure that there's a actual desired outcome in general, like a business, sort of goal that you're trying to reach to, right? So just to illustrate that, the idea is like you're doing them both. It's not one and the other sort of not aligned with each other. Might not be the same volume, but it's a lower volume, but you're able to do it. And that's where you come back into the notion of habits, right? And the particular one that I emphasize to everybody is just talking to customers, or leveraging the means by which you're talking to customers on a regular basis to help really inform the product. And so on that, talking about, it's a little bit of a change in mindset, right? And just to illustrate that a little bit, when we talk, you can often get with a lot of your choice of development or what product you're doing gets very opinion driven, right? All of a sudden, it's like talking with everybody and it's like, well, it's my opinion, this is my opinion, that, without regularly checking in on people, right? And there might be an initial curve of actually getting out there and trying to, and getting the processes in place to talk to customers. But once you've done that and you're, again, in the habit of doing it, You can have a ready stream of people to talk to and constantly be adjusting what you're asking them and so on and so forth. And when I emphasize this is also like, this is in a couple of ways. One, this is like, again, your metrics, having metered things that you're looking at behaviors on site, as well as actually talking to people, right? And so to go back to some of these sort of things like, what's the purpose of that? Why, what help it is? It's also this idea of changing ourselves, which we often can get to in product teams. We just talk about output. I made this feature and released it. All right, to what end? Right, what would that actually serving? Right, how did that actually go? So thinking about like that thing served a certain purpose that led to an outcome is critically important to make it, they make your efforts worthwhile, make them pay off. And also just like for the team, to make the team feel like they're really actually contributing across the organization. Some of these, I'll also put it out there, right? Notions do make a bit of a difference depending on when you reach a certain scale, right? I know a lot of the folks here on the team, you guys are really just starting out on a bunch of stuff. So some of these might not be as applicable now. So again, going back to that, a lot of these are the things to think about versus, oh my God, if you don't go out there and do this right now, what are you doing? Right? Because you're going to have different sort of needs at various stages within your development, right? And yeah, it's different when it's a team of 10 versus when it's a team of 50 versus a team of 200 versus 1,000 and so on and so forth, right? But this is one of the ones where it's all going back to like the notion of collaboration, right? Is very much that the idea of collaborating between what we call the product trio or the triad, right? Product lead of some kind, engineering lead, and design, right? And that these people, that everybody should be thinking about this together and participating in this research. It's not just one or the other who's actually thinking about this stuff or doing it. The whole team should be involved. And the other one I'm saying is like, obviously we want to talk to our customers, but in particular, we're talking about constant product discovery. It's regular interfacing with the other team members who might have touch points, sales, marketing, customer support, so on and so forth. They're invaluable resources for things and trends that are happening, right? So some of the things thinking about mindset, notion of collaborative, experimental is another big one. There's a big thing, oftentimes people are really concerned about that everything's got to be perfect, that if we get it out there and fail, that's another one that people like to think they're experimental, but actually often aren't. And remember, it's okay to get little, put little things out there, to ask questions, right? Even if they're wrong. Sometimes hearing something's wrong is the best thing you can do, and then not to do that. That's not the right path to go down, right? But oftentimes we really want people to say yes, to say what we're doing is right, when it can be just as useful to hear what you're doing is wrong. Obviously, that's also one that the sales team doesn't necessarily want to go out there and say all the time. So it's one of those things too, why you're thinking about this is like the different ways in which you talk to people, the different kinds of questions you ask can be grouped depending on where you come from. Another example I can give this personally, this group I'm working for now, I'm just the researcher, and asking some of these questions, it makes a huge difference. I can go talk to a customer and say, I'm just kind of trying to figure things out here, right? I'm not trying to sell you anything at the moment. I'm not trying to, solve a particular problem. I just want to know what might be useful in your future, right? And that can really change the tenor of conversations. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to mix it up across groups, right? Here's a dense one that I think is useful to talk about. When we talk about what are the kinds of things, what are the kinds of questions you're thinking about through the life cycle. I like to think of the life cycle of a product as being this notion of you discover and sort of learn about things, you define what it is you're going to be doing, you actually do the design, of it, right? You develop it, put it in, and then deliver, right? So the 5 Ds, as it were. Right. But there's also like, well, what should I be doing? What research can be going on throughout? So this is one of the things I like to sort of illustrate to people, like, here are some of the key questions you could be asking of people, right? Here's some of the things and activities you can be doing throughout the course of a development process, right? So this is, I'll leave this for people to absorb more later, or we can come back to this because it is quite dense, right? But I think it's important, particularly when you look at like the kinds of questions that you might be wanting to ask people, because I think that's another problem that often folks have. Like, well, what do I ask everybody, right? So thinking about what those core research questions and how they impact that particular stage you're at is important, right? Part of this, maybe you guys have seen this before, but there's another thing about mindset. Have you heard about the double diamond approach to things, right? And there's some frameworks in particular regards. So I'll take a look at this. again, you know, the notion of what we call design thinking is another term that gets thrown around a lot. How do you think about sort of designing the whole experience of, you know, for a product or a product, you know, that fits and works within the business so you can accomplish your goal? The double diamond is one that's the idea of like, as I'm going through a project and asking these questions through discovery all the way through delivery, right? I want to start with kind of the outcome I'd reach. And so as an example, it's like, well, what would be an outcome I'd be thinking of? It's like, I want to grow ARR within a particular type of user by 50% over the course of the year, right? That's kind of the outcome you're reaching for, right? And that's a business level outcome. The product people should be given the opportunity to say, okay, whatever methods we use, it's not just I'm going to launch features, I'm going to do activities, change things that should lead and point to that, and I'll be able to measure them, share them, and see how that actually has that impact there, right? As we're going and figuring out some of these things, right? First thing we want to do is when we research is we do want to go wide. We want to look and hear about everything. And that's where these double diamonds, what they really mean is in your thinking, start out, you want to reach an end solution, right? But go wide. Think big, look at everything, give yourself the time to think and consider and ask a lot of questions, right? Then narrow it down a little bit, right? For example, oh, I've just learned that this particular thing is a pain for people. And the reason why it's not growing in that group is because we don't have feature X, for example. Okay, or don't solve problem X. Example might be, I can't really manage the number of people who are signed up and have accounts in my organization, right? I can't get them to sign up for the product or use it once they're in. Okay, that's the problem, right? Now we ended up in some ideation, right? Thinking about how we might solve that problem, right? Get out and test our assumptions. And then testing would be something that would also follow in the notion of developing and then arriving at the final solution that gets delivered. Again, this is kind of just a way of thinking about it as you go through and answer these questions. Go wide, narrow, go wide, narrow. Right? As I've said, throughout, you guys have access to this deck. I've tried to link to like other deeper articles, right? And that sort of thing here. This is a big one. And you can see here, there's this design thinking framework. Design thinking is another one that's got, you know, a lot of people talk about the term. It's a little more complex than that, but it's well worth exploring and thinking about how some of these tools might work for you, right? Okay. Getting back to how we're thinking about this with regards to like this notion of continuous product discovery. And here I probably could have boiled this whole thing down to one slide at the beginning, but of course, hey, it's really talk to customers all the time, right? And not think that you've got to work, define, you know, do the work and then drop down and then start over again, right? You need to be able to do it and figure out ways to do it constantly. And this might be easier for some organizations than others, but that's why I also suggest leveraging sales, customer support, all those sort of people who do have these regular touch points. But if you can set up a way, it's like every week or two, I'm talking to somebody with a set of questions that I've established. And as I'm doing that, I am constantly making notes about them, logging them somewhere. And from that, extracting ideas and opportunities on a continuous basis, right? You don't have to act on these things all at the moment. You don't have to do anything, just make note of them. So I suggest for a lot of people, when you're talking to somebody, create, say, like just a Google form that's got a series of questions, right? That, you know, you could sort of always try to get around to asking and just make note of that. One of the fun things about Google Forms is it'll show up in a spreadsheet and then you can kind of search these things. It's super simple. It's like everybody's got it. You don't have to have some complex means of tracking in a system. The other one, of course, is if you're actually talking to people, record all the calls. I mean, we're recording the call today, right? But do that constantly. And there's tools out there. It's so much easier now where you can actually like create transcripts. They'll automatically turn it into things you can search, right? So talk to somebody, record what they say. And I'm doing this now with some other projects. Like there's a tool called Gong, which is used by sales, right? I've started using that as part of my research project. I put everything into sales. Or into Gong, right? And yes, they're going to be the user research sort of conversations, but now they're in the whole mix, right? And I can go in there and I can actually search across every conversation for a particular keyword. Image hosting. When did that even come up? Sometimes it's going to be something, sometimes it's not, right? But now I've got this repository of information that I can mine. This is on the qualitative side, right? going back to it also at the same time, remember to be looking and, and framing for how you're doing your actual metrics gathering out there. And a lot of this, we talked a little bit about product-led growth. The product-led growth are sort of characteristics, but keeping on track of those and comparing between the two, right? So anyway, going back to this, the idea is, we've got some things going on in development. We're actually discovering and finding opportunities all the time, making lists of them, coming back to the team. This is a great thing to be doing in your scrums or whatever. It's like new opportunities that emerge. Let's talk about them right now. Let's see if we want to inject them into some other kind of test, right? And see if we want to actually go on and deliver them. And so again, there is an initial curve in doing this, but once you actually get in the habit of doing it regularly, right, you can keep this up, and then it won't become quite so monolithic or some giant like mountain you have to climb every time you're coming up with new product and feature ideas. The other thing that I also advocate for everybody is bring all the folks into these conversations, not just sharing metrics data, but also like when you're talking to customers, if you create various forms, templates, scripts, everybody can do it. It doesn't have to be one person, not one researcher. And that's one of the other things too. Every week, we rotate around. So-and-so talks to the customer, right? But I have a way to gather all that information and quote unquote normalize it, right? That's why I'd say do something like, say, create a Google form, right? That's like the same answers every time. Then when people are taking notes, it doesn't vary. It's like, I just got to make sure I answer these questions. And then, have a free form section too, right? Where you can drop in other stuff. But then everybody can participate and everybody can contribute. And just the act of like talking to folks, right, really triggers things in people's mind. It builds empathy, right? It builds understanding. And that's particularly key when you're talking about, like, for example, engineers who are deep in the weeds all the time and don't actually see what's going on with the actual customers out there. Just having them talk to a few people will open minds in a whole bunch of ways. Right? Okay, so to reiterate, and then move on into discussion, the notion of continuous discovery, right, is weekly touch points with customers by the team who's actually building it. And that's, again, across the board, product, engineering, and design, right? And then trying to do small research activities, could be a little like variant test, could be just a question that you're asking somebody, a specific topic you want to do, and then making sure it's actually pointed towards a desired outcome. And why would we want to do this, right? Well, again, framework gathering, ongoing customer feedback and insights, right, which improves the viability and quality of decisions, right? You can actually vet sort of, assumptions against things, right? Stay relevant to the customers because you're constantly in contact with them. And then from them, mining their innovative ideas, right? And also finding little ways to tweak and, keep the user experience going as you go all along. Okay. I'll stop there. One thing I will add though, thank you. Whole bunch of links at the end there if you want to go read about more of this stuff, right? But going back to thank you, and let's talk.
Yeah, so I just want to add a little thing to the mix, Gunther, because it's good to understand what we've been talking so far. So right now we're talking to your customers all the time. A couple of days ago, we were talking with Antonio Bustamante, and he presented to each one of you this whole way of actually having everyone involved in the discussion of conversation. Everything is recorded, but they have the habit that everyone in product is also involved, and so on and so forth. That would mean many times that at this stage in the discovery phase, many one of you founders should be actually talking to your customers. Why? Because they're going to be the ones that are going to give you the next insight that you don't know that you're looking for, but you actually need. Because you're going to find patterns that it's actually a way to understand that you're actually doing something for them and not just figuring out that you developed this thing and then you figure out because that they don't want it because they don't use it. So that's one thing. Yesterday you were presented with a practical structure on how to do this. And a couple of weeks ago, we actually were talking about, when you talk about customers, how. So we talked about doing when and how interviews work, which is in the interviews, when you do observation trials, when you do product usability tests, and when you do actually other stuff as well. So you actually have already been presented some tools on how actually implement this as well. But why is it important? Because if you're not talking to your customers every week, at this stage, maybe something's going wrong. So yeah, I mean,
I'd be question for the group. Then, does this seem relevant or useful to you? And within the stuff that I've just talked about today, are there connections to some of the other things you've heard this week? You know, does this help move things forward? And by the way, I'm quite willing to hear people say, no, that's useless, or I don't agree with that, or any, you know, anything like that, if people have opinions one way or the other.
anyone? Luciano?
Yeah, if I may, I think actually it is all related. You can connect many things together. One of the things that I know that you're probably not on the bottom line, you agree, but I didn't see in the presentation today is that from the past sessions that we had, there was a lot of emphasize mostly on the technical part, because I'm the CDO of Wawa, so maybe that's why I'm seeing it, but that all these research, talking to clients and validating the idea, all these ideas that you were talking about and reiterating, the last step, the last one should be coding and building the product itself. Like try to build something without using the engineering team, using the data of the whole organization as your driver to your decisions. But apart from that, I've seen everything is getting connected, and actually it's great to see different points of view and to achieve the same result and to try to do the best, right?
Right.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Luciano. Alberto?
Hi, Gunther. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah.
It has all come to summing up all these presentations that we have seen so far, and the challenge that I'm trying to solve in my head. You see, this process may seem easier, but when putting it into action on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, it's hard to prioritize where to start. You know, like if all these 30 minutes that we have spent with you, after this, I sit down here with my partners that we're in the same room. Like, how do we implement all that we have heard with you and the other people that have shared with us this information? Is there like a simple recipe or the 1, 2, 3 steps to start, like the simple recipe to start, and then maybe put some add-ons and that I think are very important and in order to get this thing flowing and getting that feedback that's very relevant for all of us?
That is an excellent question, and the usual problem, right, of where to start with these things. So I absolutely hear you. I avoided in this saying this is exactly where to start, because it will vary a little bit depending upon the organization, right? If I understand you guys correctly, right, you have well, actually, I'm not quite sure I know how you gain your customers, right? Are people coming to you, or are you going to them? Do you have a natural steady stream of contacts with these customers to begin with, or not, right? So there's I think a little bit of more detail would help to understand exactly what the first steps would be. right?
Okay.
I'm happy that we can talk about this a little bit now individually, or we could also do a follow-up. For myself, with regards to like the continuous discovery habits thing, it's as simple as this. Find a way to schedule a conversation or two a week with somebody who represents your current, customers. Just start there, right? It take an hour, 2 hours of your time, right? See, set that up. And then in each of those cases, right, just start by describing them, who they are. List the key characteristics of each of them, and then find out, ask them, or try to characterize why they're actually using your service. Just starting just like that. Does that?
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean we are doing that, but I think in more in a casual way. We haven't structured that client conversation and that user, because we're also like in the B2B business, and we have our users that are actually downloading our app, which is a complete different story that what our clients, mainly agencies and brands who are logging in our platform to connect with these influencers, are also have different insights, are completely different criteria and needs. And that's, we do it on a weekly basis, but very casual, so we heard this week also like methodologies to do it like more formal way, get insights, write down the questions, and record the conversations and so on. And I think that's going to help us. But hearing you today, I also had new ideas and how to make this in a process that actually we can get in that objective.
Sorry, go ahead. You say exactly the right thing. Take it from casual to being semi-casual. And the main part in there is a good one being, if you have access to one of these tools, like it's recording tools. I mean, honestly, you can do it with, you can do it with Zoom or whatever. Record the calls, right? Make a transcript. And that's where things get lost, right? When it's just a conversation and you're not taking specific notes, that's where it's really hard, because you can't go back and look at that stuff again. And I'm sure a lot of the people you talk to, right, if you'd say, hey, do you mind if I record this for transcript purposes and so we can understand better and come back to you? Most people say yes, right? Not only relationship with some of these folks, but but more often than not, you can do that. And then that's one step in the right way, is taking it from whatever takes it from casual and disappearing to being captured, right? And then you can use it. Does that make sense? And does that fit with what you're thinking there?
Yes, definitely. We are here, all three of the founders, and we definitely have a roadmap, and maybe we can set up those casual meetings and get it in writing, the feedback.
Or just even between you all say, hey, every time we talk to somebody, be sure to ask, just kind of ask these 3 questions, right? And just do that amongst the founders. You guys are sitting around having these calls. And again, I understand it's hard to formalize, but it is taking that step to formalizing just a little bit can make a big difference. And the other thing I just heard from you is you do kind of have a notion of who these personas, as it were, are, right? And so just start making notes and forming that. I didn't talk about personas, as it were, and that sort of thing, but that's one of the key things you want to come out with, is the descriptions of who your customers are, right? In some way. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Don't think you got to make some fancy presentation about it. Just like write them down and share them amongst your coworkers and peers.
Super. Thank you, Gunther, a lot. Ronnie has a question.
Yeah, more than a question. I found the presentation at some point a little bit overwhelming. A lot of content to digest. For me, the main takeaways are, again, the necessity to validate with the customer that what we believe is our value proposition, that it's actually bringing value, and that's solving a real problem. So going back to the customer is a necessity, something that we've talked about the last few weeks. And also, you know, something that we need to go back and understand if, in our case, should we incorporate some product-led strategy, or should we just keep our path as a sales-led strategy? It opens our eyes a little bit and you know, try to figure that out, whether there's a mix there or if there can be value from switching strategies. Just no answer at this point, but at least keeping an open mind.
Yes, thank you for that, saying that. That's I appreciate and understand that there was a lot of content in here, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to actually share the presentation with everybody so that you can look at it later, and in particular, if the, you know, read some of the articles that are associated with what we're talking about here. Like I said, I like it when I go to something and it's information rich and there's more for me to do later versus just hearing somebody sort of, you know, speak to some vague, you know, abstract representations of something that when I look back at, it's like, what were you talking about? Right. So that's the balance I was trying to strike here. Maybe a little too dense for immediate absorption, but hopefully over time there's something. And then the other part is fully there's no reason you have to do any of these things, right? Just having some awareness is good, right? It sounds to me off the cuff, right, that your business is probably not oriented towards the product-led growth kinds of things yet. Maybe that would be different over time. I can say one of the things that I have observed, sometimes you want to use PLG tactics when you're trying to expand within an organization. Example, so you sell to a large organization, right, and your real customer, right, is the person who made the buying decision to deploy it across the organization. That's one person, right? That's your customer, right? But your users might be the 100 people in their department, for example, right? And then, well, how do I get them all, you know, once that they bought this thing, I want people who, you know, to use it. So there might be a point, you know, in which you're thinking about deployment after the sale, in which some of these PLG tactics actually are relevant, right? Like, oh, you know, they bought us this new thing that we're supposed to use, but people don't really use it. Well, okay, so, you know, right, you can suggest ways to have that expand once you've already landed, right? Land and expand, as it were. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think there's definitely a valuable content in what you shared. And it's trying to understand what's the best way for us to use it,
For sure,
be internally or going out to the customer. But yes,
yeah,
appreciate your time and going in depth.
Of course,
all this.
absolutely.
Super.
Cool.
Any additional questions, comments whatsoever? No. We're good. Jesus, I see you nodding. We're good, or would you like to ask something? Okay,
No, no.
Charlie.
You know, our case is like a mix of feelings because we have like the we're still like in a discovery phase. We have some early signs that the project could work, and we did some research like a while ago, and we are trying to keep the pace, talking to customers. However, I would like to have your point of view on how to like start doing or releasing instead of doing, because doing is like just do it, right? But like releasing new experiments and how should we leverage like the mix of discovery and using this as a tool, because we actually have the capacity to build this product-led growth motion. So what would you suggest in our case? Like, for instance, we have merchants and shoppers, and this is like the chicken and egg problem. So we are not a marketplace.
Yeah,
for us, that's what would you suggest to like maybe start the discovery process for this kind of motion?
Going back to the before, it's like, are there specific things and goals that you have established already? What is the outcome? What are you hoping to achieve within the year? Right? First question. I don't have to answer it right now. I mean, I'm just saying, it's like, put that in mind, right? Then think, what are some of the questions that I could ask, right? That would hopefully lead to that outcome, right? Do I already have a sense of what they are, or do I need to, actually figure out what questions I need to ask, right? So more often than not, people actually already have questions in their mind, right? Like, oh, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. I think maybe this might make a difference, or whatever it might be. So gather those list of those questions, right? Determine in some cases how far along they are and whether or not there's something you want to ask somebody in person, or whether it's something, okay, this is formulated enough to actually do something that I could build, I can test, right, technically, right? This is this, are you following here, right? Because it sounds like you might have the technical basis to be able to get to, right, doing something like experiment testing, right? And I think the other big one is also not being afraid to deploy something and test it. I think a lot of people get scared when they think about actually doing an A/B test, or not. I mean, sometimes people say A/B, that means 50-50. What you call a variant test, right? Where it's like you're actually shipping a different experience to a set of users, right? A lot of it's been online. When you're just starting out, it can be hard. If I've only got 100 users and that's one thing, right? When you get some level of scale, 10,000, plus or regulars, you can start getting, got statistical significance enough, right, to start doing something. And if you think, all right, I'm going to peel off 2% of 10,000, right? That's a few hundred, in that case, and you can actually learn a little something from that level. So if you're at the stage where you could maybe do that, I'd advocate for trying to do some sort of variant testing. Is this leading, is this answering your question? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is helping us to to deploy a mindset like this.
Yeah,
this is something that we are trying to discover how to do, even though I have some experience, because my previous company I used to do this kind of things. This is always a discovery process, and having the right mindset to do this.
And so much of this is mindset, and the main one in that case too is it's you know what, and if it doesn't work, okay, then you don't do it, right? So we oftentimes spend so much time thinking, spending work to make sure that it's right. 6 months later, right, you may have run it, where you could have just done something that failed, right, on a small scale this week, and next week, right, question answered, right, and some part of the question was answered because of failure, but it wasn't just speculating and thinking and going back and forth for a long time, right? So that's one of the other ones, is really being able to embrace that experimental mindset. So yeah, so some, I mean, I don't know exactly the problems you're trying to answer there, but happy to, if you've got you want to send a question or two, I can certainly happy to chat a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. And then I have another question, this might be not for everyone, and I hope this could help others, but it's also going to help us. What is the stack you recommend, the tech stack that you recommend in terms of product, services, things that you want to have in this kind of thinking, for instance, in the pirate funnel? What's your set of recommended tools? Because I will just point a specific case. For instance, we have this split path where we are currently using Amplitude, for instance, but Amplitude is not being so useful at the level we need.
Yeah.
And we are trying to shift to Mixpanel, because Mixpanel can be connected to HubSpot. That's just a random case. That's the kind of take out from you that I would love to hear.
Some of those things depend on what level you're trying to do the analysis, how deep the metric you're trying to understand go. I mean, Do you guys, can you guys, well, a few of the others that are out there to consider Segment, right, which actually feeds to a variety of other kinds of tools. I don't know if you're familiar with Segment. The Google Data Studio, right, for some of these things. I get the other, so off the top of my bat is, understand a little bit more. I always want to understand a little bit more about what people are using first before saying what they should be doing and the particular types of analysis you're trying to do, because there's multiple kind of levels when you're talking about tracking metrics and behavior that you might want to look at. Are you trying to do something like where it's as simple as like trying to figure out a funnel, right? And Google Analytics can help you with that. Or you're trying to just understand traffic between different places, that can be good. At the core of it, particularly for technical people, being able to actually, save all the logs. And you got anybody who's really good at SQL in there somewhere, right? That's ultimately, right, one of the things that's most helpful is if somebody's able to actually totally dig down there into the actual the real data versus having another sort of layer on top of it. Does that isn't a full answer to your question, right? It's
no, I think it's a tricky one, right? Like,
yeah, it's a tricky one. So it depends on what the questions you're trying to answer, right? And the people who are doing it too. And who your audience is for something. Like I said, it's like if you're a whole bunch of developers, right? Just being able to do SQL queries could answer your questions, right? And I see a mix of that all the time now. Like I said, currently, what are we using? Here's a project I'm working on right now. What are we using? We are using a combination of Data Studio, direct, other kinds of direct SQL pulls, a tool called Full Story, which I really love, which watches session analysis, right? User Snap, which also is another one that gives you like a view of customer behaviors, but it's much more surface level. And then, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the last one. That's actually what we're using. But it's it's a mix of those things.
Okay, so yeah, I'm certain that works super well when you have a volume of data transaction. It's actually a massive problem. At this initial discovery stage, I would be very confident that the good old talking by telephone and recording everything will solve 85% of the problems you're getting at. So as long as you're doing that properly, everything else is just a way to be comfortable on this side of the desk and not actually being comfortable talking to your clients every day, which will give you the real insight. I mean, we'd like to stress, it's been talking to your customers really is gonna be a super powerful source of insight if you do it properly. So just add that to your tool set in addition to whatever you're doing today.
Obviously, there's other folks who are working on some of these challenges themselves, and perfect opportunity to hear what other people are doing, or if this is a problem that all of you have.
Anyone would like to share? We still have 5 minutes to spare. And while you get the courage to talk out loud and speak it out, I just want to let you know that Gunther has put forward some office hours so that you can actually go deep into some specific things that you're interested in doing and understanding better. I'm still gonna coordinate the details with them, but I will let you know once they're openly available.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk more in depth on some of these things because, yeah, we're talking kind of high level on some of this stuff, right? So if there's specific questions to dig in, I'm happy to do so. Herman, you were about to say something?
Yes, I wanted to ask. So because we were in the same room, so I was hearing myself.
Okay, I got you.
So I wanted to ask, because now we are doing this talking to customer very casual, like Alberto says. How do we build a process or do it more professional on a regular basis? How do we get this beta tester to talk to us? Like, I don't know, like how like I cannot imagine right now how can we like ask on a formal way to our users. So
maybe you can enlighten
do you do the
Gunther with who
approach
you're pretending to talk to. I mean, I know you know who you want to talk to.
Sorry.
I mean,
Wait,
just
sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, just Herman, maybe you want to tell Gunther who you're actually trying to talk to so that he can get a better idea on why it's complicated.
Yeah, so like maybe the influencers, because they're like you know, casual people, like they don't like I do like a focus group or something like that. It's something that
A
could
focus
work.
group could work. I think one of the differences, yes, I can understand why you're talking about like influencers. They're people who are, you know, maybe they're important in some way, right, or famous or something like that. So the way they're going to interact with you is going to be different than a regular user, right? The thought is, so yes, if you're having these casual conversations, one thing you might do is, again, just across all of you, if you have specific questions you might want to ask and you have enough, you know, relationship with them, just coordinate across the group and say, always try to ask somebody this, right? I would think also that since you're providing, hopefully you're doing something that's of value to them, right? You can also frame it as like, hey, we really want to make this work super well for you, right? So put it in terms of what they get out of it, right? Not what you get out of it, but what they're going to get out of it. It's like saying, we're making this thing that's going to make you just explode. I mean, and don't overpromise, but we want to make sure that this works. So having some sort of like comment from you would be helpful. And the other thing, by the way, about, and one of the challenges with conversations is they don't always go exactly the way you want, right? You're not always going, that's just the fact, right? You're not going to you're not going to say, I've got a list of these specific questions, you must answer every single one. That just, it doesn't happen more often than not. So that's one of the reasons why volume and trying to do it all the time matters, because you're not going to get always all the answers from somebody, but over time you will gather a bunch of responses to the questions. Does that make sense? Right?
Yes.
But I can see, so the two things are, one, continue doing it a lot, ask a lot of people questions. You won't get all the answers all the time, but over time you will get a lot of answers, right? And some of them will overlap. Second, make sure that when you're trying to get somebody to talk to, you put it in terms of what they get out of this, right? In a certain way, right? Like they will influence this thing that we're making for you. They can help guide its direction, right? They can be the ones who are helping set the vision for where this goes into the future, right? And the other thing, I mean, you could say is also you can just pay people in one way or another. Just give them some sort of compensation to say, hey, if you talk to us for an hour, we'll, you know, give you a certain amount of credit within the service. We'll, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, that happens all the time, right? It's like pay for somebody's time. And I, you know, not knowing these people, I don't know what their value, you know, it is described as some of these things are, right? But if you do a combination of those things, you can often get people to respond if you know, if they're interested. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes, now it doesn't make sense now with the pay and with time. I think now.
Right. When it comes down to it, sometimes that's what it is. And it doesn't always have to be direct payment. Sometimes, so I have a colleague who is just soliciting a whole bunch of people to do these things. And, you know, she said, hey, I'll pay you for half an hour. I'll pay you $100, or you can give it to charity. And that will depend a little bit too, because sometimes, you know, that they're targeting like executives of various kinds who might be like, sure, I'll talk to you. Oh, and you're going to give it to charity? I mean, that amount of money doesn't mean anything to me because I'm a important executive, but that'd be cool that you guys are doing something good with it. So yes, I'll talk to you.
Super. Gunther, it's been super enlightening. Everything. I think we made the best use of time and we're on time. So again, thank you again and again and again for always sharing so much knowledge with us. Again, the purpose of this talk was to give each one of you tools and understanding of what are the best practices today. And thankfully, Gunther has also shared with you resources so that you can actually dig deeper by yourself. And going forward, I will share with you, each one of you, the availability of Gunther to actually be able to dig deeper into your specific questions once they arise. Okay. So again, thank you, Gunther, for being such a buen trip with everyone, with us. And again, thank each one of you for your time for this session, and specifically for being able to collaborate with your good questions, and hopefully this will all help you move forward.
Gracias all. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.
Okay, nos
Yeah,
vemos.
awesome.
Gracias, chao.
Thanks, Gunther.
Gracias.
Chao, gracias.